Hey carnivores, it's Rod from the Stay Strong Live Long channel. Thanks for joining me today. It's 10 a.m. in Sydney on Tuesday. For most of you, that's in your future, as I always like to say. If you're tuning in from Alaska, I think it's about 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, USA, depending on which side you're on. It's getting a little later, 7 or 8 o'clock at night. Thank you all so much for joining me on the channel today. Thanks for your support as usual. So let me know where you are from. I'm going to throw up a banner just to remind you guys. I'm always curious about which part world, let me try that again. Which part of the world you guys are from. And I've had some interesting countries that I've seen. So yeah, let me know where you're from. I'll give you a shout out. I'm going to bring in today's special guest, which is Todd Bockness from the Carnivore Cure. I won't give away any of Todd's stories. Some of you might have seen him on other channels. He is a very passionate speaker, and he's made some incredible changes to his health as a result of following the carnivore way of eating. So I've been looking forward to having Todd on the channel, and I'm going to go and grab him right now.
Howdy, guys.
Welcome, buddy. How are you doing?
Good, Rod. How are you?
Good.
I sure appreciate you having me on. This is awesome.
Oh, you're welcome. I think if you keep bringing that hat, people will always bring you onto their channels because that is one awesome hat. What do you call that kind of? Is it a Stepson? What do you call that kind of hat?
Stetson's a big brand name, but actually, this is their competitor. It's a Resistol. That's my favorite brand. This has been since I was a kid. So always
Right.
support the Resistol brand.
Yeah, it's got a distinctly, for me as an Australian, it's got a distinctly American flavor because we only have like Akubra's it is actually a brand name, but it's a style of hat that's
Yeah.
different to those ones. So I'll just do a quick couple of shout outs and then we'll talk a bit more about what you've been up to. Warrior Milts, thank you for tuning in. I don't actually remember seeing you tune in before, so welcome if it's your first time here. Melissa from Copper's Kitchen, of course, is here. Thank you, great supporter of the channel. And
For sure.
I think that you've changed your channel name a little bit, if I'm not mistaken. It's a little bit different from what it was before. Tracy Kinsell from South Texas. I'm just imagining your Texan drawl, Tracy. Thanks for joining us. Michael Johnson from Montana, thank you. And Robin Heron from Kalamazoo. There's a place called Kalamazoo. How awesome is that? In Michigan, USA. I mean, it's amusing to me because it's just such a cool sounding name for us here in Australia. We don't have anything like that. Peachy Pamin MD. Hello from Salisbury. Well, welcome to the channel. Thanks for joining us here today. Shayna, big supporter of the channel. You're a legend, Shayna. Thanks for joining us today. Susan, another legend. Hello to you. Welcome. Thanks for joining us here today. We've got Melissa from Niagara Falls in CA, I guess is California. Looks like one of your listeners there, Todd Robin Heron. And let's see. Michael Johnson. Who did I miss? Did I miss everyone? Oh, Mike Shaw TV from Iowa. Thanks for joining us, Mike. Appreciate you joining us here today. Amelia from Ireland. Amelia, that must be early where you are in Europe. All right. Yes, we are looking forward to Todd's story, so I'll stop the shout outs. So I guess my first question for you, Todd, is, well, how about just give us a little bit of background on your, how you grew up? Because I find it interesting how people grow up and their relationship they develop with food has a lot to do with, where they got to today. So yeah, give us a little bit of background, and then perhaps how you discovered carnivore initially, and then how we got to where we are today.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, when growing up, we were poor. I think so. I think that's where some of that came from. We were broke. So we ended up, I'm the youngest of 6 kids. And so we kind of were on a budget. And when you're on too much of a budget, that ends up with bad food sometimes. You know? So I think that was one of the things. But yeah, No, my dad was a Marine, and then when he got out of the Marine Corps, he got an electronics degree when he was in the Marine Corps, and so he started an electrical contracting company when he got out. And so when I was young, I was homeschooled till I was about 12, but Dad had some health problems from the Marine Corps. He was in Vietnam, and he got exposed to Agent Orange, and it
Ooh,
damaged the inside of his arteries. So he had his first heart attack, when he was 38 years old, and it damaged his heart. So he was uh, trying to feed 6 kids and work with a bad heart. So as
yeah,
his
it's
kids
young.
got, yeah, it was tough. And so as kids got older, well, we became little electricians for him. So he would show us what to do. And so I've been pretty much working in the field ever since I was 12 years old. Kind of dropped out of school, and my new school became learning how to be an electrician with Dad. And so that's how that went. But I was always just really big, and most of it was just because I was addicted to sugar. And as a big kid, I think now looking back at it after doing some research, because my two oldest siblings are fairly skinny, you know, and then as mom kept having kids, they kept getting a little bigger and a little bigger. And I was reading Dr. Jason's Fung's book, and he was talking about how insulin, uh, not insulin, but blood sugar can transfer to the baby in the womb, and that you can actually develop insulin resistance inside the womb. And that made so
Wow.
much sense to me because, right now there's a obesity epidemic of 6-month-old babies in the United States. And I really believe that is because the mothers are insulin resistant and eating a lot of sugar, and that makes the baby's pancreas have to deal with a pretty intense adult size, blood sugar spike. And so
Mm.
they actually develop insulin resistance inside the womb. And I think that's what happened for me because, by the time I was 5, maybe 6 years old, I was 200 pounds, by the time I was, 14 years old, I was 600 pounds.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I ended up being super big kid, but I was also working construction in the field. So I was carrying it okay. I built a lot of muscle and a pretty thick frame to haul it around. But it just wore on me forever. Just even when I was young, it just was making my back hurt, making my feet hurt as I had a brat, all those things. And kind of dealing with it. So then I just, from the time I was young, maybe 14, 15, I've just been seeing doctors and nutritionists and being on every calorie in, calorie out, you know, sad American diet, restrictive protocol there's ever been. And the only thing that ever worked for me was just starvation diets, which I didn't even realize back then. But the reason why those were successful for me is what it was basically on extended fasts, and it puts you into a fasted state of ketosis. And that was the most effective thing for me. So I always did that. But then when I go back to eating, I'd go back to what they said was healthy, the standard American diet, and it would all just flood back on. Every time I go back to eating, I'd lost over 300 pounds twice in my life, and I'd lost over 200 pounds 4 times in my life before I found, carnivore. And because I could only do it if I wasn't eating anything. Like the last one when I was 24, 25, I got down to 337 pounds, but I only ate twice a week for 17 months, and I was only eating 2,000 calories or less a week, and it was miserable, and I was tired, and I was losing muscle like crazy, and I was getting weak. Like I tore my rotator cuff that year. I had to get a knee surgery that year because I blew out my right knee, and it just wasn't good not eating for that long, not getting any protein. Just was eating my muscle tissue. It was, I mean, I was always, at least when I was big, I was always super strong. And then all of a sudden I lost all that weight, but I couldn't lift, 1,000-foot roll of wire like I used to. I used to be able to lift those with one hand, and then now all of a sudden an 80-pound roll of wire feels, god awful heavy, just silliness. And it was clear to me that wasn't the answer, And so I was just on this massive roller coaster the whole time. And that last time kind of got to me. I got I got down to 337 pounds, and I was like, all right, this time I'm going to keep this off. And I ended up getting married, and then I'm like, all right, my wife's going to cook super healthy food. I'm going to eat this, I'm going to eat 3 square meals a day, and I'm going to eat the rice and the chicken and the steamed vegetables. And that weight came back on so fast. It was incredible. And I gained extra weight. I got up to like 660 pounds. I would never been sicker in my life. I'd never been tireder in my life. And it was just kind of a devastating blow when that came back on, because I was like, how many times can I do this? It's just like, there was just no answer for it. I would do something crazy. It's not easy not to eat for 17 months, and to work and to get up and work in construction, all that stuff.
It's a lot of willpower.
Well, and that's the funny thing too. Back then, every time I'd fail, I'd go, well, there's something wrong with me. I'm not as strong as other people. I don't have the resolve other people have. I don't have the willpower other people have, or whatever. And, it just messes with your brain. And it wasn't until later down the road, when I really started researching it, that I started seeing, 75% of America has the same problem. 75% of the world has the same problem, and some people, it manifests in a lot of weight, but other people, it's just different metabolic diseases, or just different, autoimmune diseases, or whatever, heart disease, cancer. And it's all the same dang thing. And, with the increase that we've had just in the last 50 years in disease and metabolic disease and weight gain, obesity, heart disease, I mean, new diseases that didn't even have a name 50 years ago, I finally started realizing that, I was sitting there going, I don't know another person around me that's skinny that maintains it by not eating for 17 months. They're not doing that, and so I started realizing that, maybe I got to stop beating myself up about everything and find the real answer, that maybe there is a real problem, And so that kind of started changing my mind as I was going through it. And that was, the thing that I'm most guilty of. I mean, we all have a hand to play in our problems. I'm not, it's not like I drank all the soda and ate all the sugar, and it's 100% my deal. And I got to own that. But the biggest thing is I was so complacent. What I'm most mad at myself about was that I allowed myself to be tricked and delegate my own personal health care to so-called professionals that clearly have something to gain by selling me drugs and keeping me sick, and that was super naive. I should have never done that. And I definitely regret that it took me this long to get my head together, and start attacking my health like I would my job and my profession and the things that I do, because I would never delegate something important in my job to somebody else. I would make sure my hands were on it and make sure that I figured it out and make sure that I knew the ins and outs of it. And for whatever reason, just because my mind was, I just was in this weird dogma that, oh no, the doctors know best and I'm going to listen to those guys. Who am I? I can't possibly go against the doctors. Well, that'd be ignorant, but when you really step back and look at it and realize that they're selling the bullets and the band-aids, they're all the same people. They're sitting here making us sick and making money off it. And then they're managing our symptoms and selling us a lie just to make more money off it. It's a ginormous industry. And once I woke up to that, then I stopped feeling guilty and shameful about all these things. And I just, pardon my French, but I got pissed about it, And I was like, this is ridiculous, They're, my brother died. Basically, I have when we were working in North Dakota in the oil field, we all got a bad cold virus. Ty went into the urgent care in Dickinson, North Dakota, and they screwed up his prescription. They gave him a steroid instead of an antibiotic. And so he didn't know better, and he took it. And sure, Ty's health could have been better because he's on the same diet I was. He's a little taller than me, but he's about 320 pounds. But he just never missed a day of work. He's just solid as a rock, just hard worker. And they gave him those stupid steroids. And those steroids, turns out they knocked out his immune system, because when you have a steroid, it compromises your immune system. And because he had an active cold virus and no immune system, it turned into an infection in his lungs, and then it spread to his heart. And then he had 13 heart attacks in like a 12-hour period. They had to life flight him to Seattle, to Salt Lake, I mean. And they were able to revive him there, but they had to put a pacemaker and a defibrillator in it, and his heart was run at 38. And so while he was waiting on the heart transplant list in a nursing home, because they had to take care of him because he couldn't even sit up, because his heart wouldn't pump hard enough to get blood to his brain just to sit up. And so he was in the nursing home for almost 2 years, waiting to get on the heart transplant list. And he just didn't wake up one morning at 40 years old, passed away over a misdiagnosis of drugs from these, corporate drug dealers that we all put up with. And they killed him, and my dad had diabetes and leukemia. And he had I think it was kidney failure, because he was on so many drugs that when he got leukemia later in his life, he couldn't even take the medication for the leukemia, because the drugs that he'd been taking for his heart and for his diabetes ruined his kidneys. So he couldn't even do that. And so he passed away 11 days after my brother Ty did. And that was right about the time 6 months earlier, I'd gotten out of the ICU, because I was in there for, at that time, I was in there 3 or 4 days because I couldn't breathe. I had this chronic lung problem since I was 18 years old. I just couldn't breathe. My oxygen all the time was at 88% saturation, and I could just never breathe. And I had a million specialists look at it, and they all said, oh, we don't know what it is. And that was actually, that last time I was in the ICU, that's what kind of changed my course. I started, I decided, I just noticed that when I was drinking less, energy drinks and soda and Coca-Colas and that stuff, that my lungs were a little bit better. So when I got out, I was like, I'm just like, these doctors never do anything to help. And they just give me more medication. They gave me Advair and an inhaler and a nebulizer and all this junk that was costing me a fortune every month and just not fixing anything. And so when I got out of there, I just like, all right, I got to make some change. I got to start somewhere with something sustainable that I can keep off. And so I just swore off drinking any calories. So I'm like, I'm never going to drink any calories. So I was just drinking. Unfortunately, I was still drinking diet soda because I didn't know how bad that was yet. And I was drinking unsweetened tea and coffee, and my lungs got a little bit better. I stopped having as much lung inflammation. And
so what made you decide just to stop drinking calories, Todd, if I can interrupt you? So was there something, did you hear something, or was it just like, okay, that's how I'm going to start?
It was because when I noticed that the more soda or that I drank, the worse my lungs got. Like if I had a day where I had a heavy day where I drank a lot of soda, I had a lot more congestion and tightness in my lungs and just had a harder time breathing. So, and the doctors never told me that. The doctors never said, hey, stop drinking sugar. They knew what my diet was. They didn't say, they weren't sitting here going, drink all the soda you want, but they also didn't say, hey, take insulin resistance, and the byproduct of burning sugar is lactic acid, and it's highly inflammatory, and it causes mucus. And they didn't say anything. They're just like, here's 3 drugs, take those as much as you can. And that was always their answer. So I just noticed that on myself. So I was like, well, this is one place I can start. Let's just hopefully I'll get some weight off. I'm putting calories in, because I'd always been a guy where I never ate a bunch, but I always drank all my calories. I'd only eat one meal usually a day, sometimes 2, but usually it was 1. And it wasn't even, sure, it might be a 2,000 calorie meal because I was eating like crap, or even a 2,500 calorie meal. But the problem was I was drinking probably another 1,500 to 2,000 calories a day, and energy drinks and soda and iced coffees in the morning, because I lived off of caffeine and sugar. It was the only thing that would keep me moving, which was also something nobody explained. When I was on the carb roller coaster, my body didn't make energy out of fat, and my insulin was so high all the time that my body wouldn't use fat as energy, and I didn't know that. And why all these professionals, I go to these professionals and they would tell me, they would add more carbs to my diet, but they call them healthy complex carbs. They'd cut out meat and fat out of my diet. And then they'd tell me I need to see a psychologist for my eating problems, because it was mental, not to mention I had, anxiety and depression that was just crippling and through the roof, that, they said was a mental thing. And it turns out that was a lie. It was a complete and total hormone thing from my diet, it was just incredible. But anyhow, once I stopped drinking the calories, and I was able to sustain that for about a year, and things were incrementally better. I wasn't losing a lot of weight, but at least I felt better. My brother was into lifting weights at the time, and he was reading all the weightlifter magazines and blogs, and he really liked Frank Zane's books, And so he said, well, you should do the Frank Zane weightlifter diet, and that was high protein, low fat, and moderate carbohydrates, And so I was like, all right, I'm going to do that. So, and there was a thing in there, and basically they're saying, and I misunderstood this at the time, but how much protein you should eat a day. So I was trying to eat 300 grams of protein a day, which I don't know if you've ever tried that, but that is a lot of protein.
Yeah, that's a fair amount. I don't think I'd get quite that close. Maybe like 200-ish. Yeah.
300 is a lot of protein, especially when it's lean, dry protein with no fat. It's pretty miserable, So my diet, basically, I started eating twice a day because I had to, because there's no way you could eat 300 grams of protein in one meal. You'd die, your stomach would explode. So I started eating in the morning. I would eat egg whites and turkey sausage, and forget what else I was putting. The egg whites, turkey sausage with mustard. I was doing low fat Greek yogurt that I'd mix with protein powder in the morning to get more protein in. And then I was eating at night, it would always be brown rice and the most dried out, tasteless, lifeless chicken on the planet. Also, I wasn't supposed to have salt, so there was no seasoning, no salt on it. It was just the most miserable thing ever. But I did that for 14 months, and I lost 37 pounds in 14 months. That was it. And I had never felt more depressed, more suicidal, more full of anxiety, weaker, tired, miserable person in my life. And after the end of 14 months, I was like, I can't do this anymore. I'm going to fall off the wagon if I don't make something better, because this is not working. And I decided that one of my biggest problems, I had such palate fatigue because I had eaten so much dry chicken breast. I couldn't take it anymore. And I was like, I got to do something to make this chicken breast not be so dry. If I could at least, I couldn't stomach chewing. I mean, it was nauseating to put one piece of chicken in my mouth. And so I just looked up on the internet. I'm like, what's the best way to make, chicken and protein not dry? And it came up that sous vide is one of the best ways to cook a protein without drying it out. And so I
Yeah, I
ended up
love sous
on
vide.
yeah, it's awesome. I'm an addict now. And so there's a channel on YouTube called Sous Vide Everything, Google Foods. I don't know if you know him.
I gotta check that out. Yeah, I heard you talk about this. I gotta have a look because I want to get better. I haven't done much of it, but I'll definitely
Yeah,
get better.
that guy's the OG of sous vide. He does his channel's huge and it's awesome. But I was watching that dude use these sous vide machines, but he kept sous vide. I think they're Brazilian, and he kept sous vide something a Brazilian cut of steak called picanha and ribeyes, and they would sous vide them, and then they would sear them in butter every time. And man, after eating all that dry chicken, I was sitting here watching all these videos of this delicious steak just dripping with butter, and I'm like, oh my god, that looks so good. And I'd watch hours of this to figure it out. You know, at first it was research, and now it was just like, you know, I was just sitting here drooling over these steaks. And so I'd ordered up the equipment, and my stuff came, and I knew it was coming that day. So I went to the store, and I'm like, I'm gonna have one ribeye, but I always laugh about it because I knew. I mean, I was lying to myself because I bought a pack of 4 giant ribeyes that day. You know, I didn't buy one, and so I got home that day. And I'm like, before I do this meat, you know, this chicken thing, I just have to try one ribeye like Guga did, you know. So it was just in my head. And so I kind of ran the macros, and I'm like, you know, I'll be a little over, but I'll be pretty close, at least on the calories, if I just eat one ribeye a day, seared in butter, and I get rid of all the other bull crap. I get rid of the rice and the yogurt and the protein powders and the egg whites and all the nonsense. If I just get rid of all that crap and I just have this one ribeye, at least I won't go crazy on the calories, and maybe it won't hurt, you know. So I cooked up that ribeye and I ate it, and I mean, it was just like a fog lifted off my mind when I ate that thing. My brain felt better, my depression lifted, my anxiety wasn't so bad. You know, it wasn't, none of it was completely gone, but it was exponentially better than I had felt in 14 months, you know. And I just thought it was like a mental thing. You know, just thought I was happy to not be eating, and you know, my 4,000 piece of dried chicken, you know, and that I was just happy because of that. And so I was like, well, I do have these other 3 ribeyes, so maybe if I just eat once a day, I'll just have one ribeye a day, and then I'll go back to the chicken. But long story short, I did that for those 4 consecutive days, and I never felt better in my life. I had so much more energy for the first time in 14 months. I had more energy than before I even started this diet. And I'd lost, like, I forget what it was, but it was like 12 or 13 pounds in 4 days. And obviously it was water, but at least I was, you know, I was just less inflamed. My lungs were better. My brain worked better. I was sleeping better. I was happy. My mood was better. And then, so after those 4 days, I was like, there's something going on here. How is it that I'm eating all this devil food that I'm not supposed to touch? I'm eating butter and red meat and fat, which is everything I'm not supposed to do. And I'm feeling the best I've ever felt, you know, in a long time, for sure, at least. And so I actually started Googling. I'm like, why do I feel so good eating ribeye seared in butter? And Dr. Darren, I'll never forget it. It's kind of funny because I just did a phone consultation with him. But Dr. Darren Schmidt out of Ann Arbor, Michigan popped up talking about ketosis and ketogenic diets and low carb diets. And it all just clicked as soon as I started watching that. I think I watched, I don't know, you'd have to listen to my sisters and my mom because that was all I talked about was keto for like a month. Once I got into that thing, and all I did was watch every video and read every article and ordered every book I could find on it. And I just started reading everything. And that was kind of how I started going down the rabbit hole. And then if I would have just stayed with the ribeye and the butter, I would have been fine. But well, by reading all the books, I also got inundated with kind of dirty keto philosophy and cookbooks and all that stuff. And I fell into the trap of, you know, all the keto products, the keto, you know, the Slim Fast keto products, the Atkins keto products, the Quest keto products, which are just more processed keto crap. You know, they're just using the name, but I didn't realize that at the time. But but I was still losing more weight and feeling better. But I still had terrible sugar and carb cravings all the time too. It wasn't going away. I had terrible soda cravings. And so this went up and down. My weight was fluctuating. I was having a terrible time I was taking my blood and reading my ketones and stuff. And I could only get into like point eight, whatever that reading was. I know they're saying you're supposed to be between
0.8. That's still pretty good.
Well, I didn't know that was good because it said you're supposed to be at like 3 or something, 2.5 to 3.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I just wasn't having. I didn't feel like I was getting into ketosis enough, and I kept trying things, and I kept having cravings, and so I was all over the board, and that was going on. But then I read Dr. Jason Fung's book on the diabetes code about insulin resistance, and how your fasted insulin levels kind of dictate your I think he calls it the body mass set point. There's a correlation between how much body mass you're going to have compared to your fasted insulin levels. It's like your body's thermostat. And he talked about how I'd already been doing OMAD pretty much this whole time, which was helpful. But he talked about if you could do prolonged fasts, that would help. And so I remember I was somewhere in there, I read about that guy, and it was like in the 1950s or 60s that did a water fast for like 400 and some days or something, and he lost like 300 and some pounds. And so I was like, well, if he can do that and didn't die, then I decided I wanted to do a 40-day water fast and see how I'd feel, you know? And so I started a 40-day water fast. I made it to day 21, and I got super sick, and my lungs weren't working, and I couldn't breathe. And long story short, I wasn't taking any supplements. I wasn't taking any electrolytes while I was doing it. And because I wasn't eating, I was drinking tons of water, like 3 gallons of water a day. And so I just gotten depleted in electrolytes, particularly potassium. And it turns out, I guess, when you get so low on potassium, it screws up your blood plasma somehow, so that I don't know how it works, but somehow your red blood cell platelets drop, and so I had really low red blood cell count, and so the blood cells weren't carrying oxygen. So felt like I was in an asthma attack all the time. So I had to get treated for that. I had to take a bunch of potassium and get my red blood cells up. But the bad thing about having low red blood cell count is it kind of compromises your immune system. And so during that time, right when I was feeling my sickest, I caught COVID. And that was a nightmare when I caught COVID without a real good immune system. Because I think I'd already had COVID the previous year, because my whole family had caught it. And that was when I was on keto and was doing fine, but I didn't have a problem with it. It just came and gone in like 2 days, and it wasn't a big deal. And then this time, a year later, I caught it again with a compromised immune system, and it was a nightmare. It was absolutely horrible. I got terrible pneumonia, and, not to get political, but I didn't believe in the protocols and the treatment for COVID at the time, and I still don't. And I already had, by the time I'd gone through this, I had a particular distrust for doctors and the medical system as far as disease went. And then to make matters worse, a friend of mine, Ryan, had caught COVID a week earlier, and he had just gone into the hospital right when about the second day that I had COVID. He had just gone into the hospital. And they gave him, I can't remember what it is, but I think it was called remdesivir, was the treatment at the time. And it had a tendency to waterlog people's lungs and put them on respirators when they're using it. Like sometimes I guess it would work, but most of the time they'd end up on a respirator. And so I was watching that pretty closely, and Ryan went in, and he was 38 years old and healthy as a horse. and they gave him remdesivir. 12 hours later, he was on a respirator, and about 6 hours later, he had passed away. And so when that
Goodness.
happened, I was just like, if I go in there, I'm going to die. Like if Ryan didn't have a chance, I don't have a chance. But at that time, I was somewhere around 600 pounds, and maybe a little bit more. And the pneumonia was so bad, and I already had compromised lungs and everything. I'm just like, I'm not going on one of those respirators, or I'm not going to make it out. And so I prayed a lot about it and decided to do the ivermectin treatment at home. And I had my nebulizers, and my sister and brother-in-law had been through COVID a couple of times and had it pretty bad. So they had a regimen that they were doing that they found that worked with remdesivir, and they would use nebulizers and breathe in hydrogen peroxide, iodine, and I think baking soda. They'd nebulize it and it helped their lungs. And so I started doing that, and it was miserable, but it took I think it was about 15 days roughly. And I had a terrible fever for about 13 of those days, a terrible bad fever. And I was coughing up. I mean, I was literally coughing up chunks of blood. These little things were coming out of my lungs that were like blood clots that looked like the bronchial tubes in your lungs. I was just coughing them up for almost 2 weeks. I was coughing those things up, just blood, and I was pale and I couldn't breathe, but I was fighting through it, and I finally got through it. But something had happened, and I started putting on fluid like crazy. I just started swelling up everywhere. My legs were swollen up, my abdomen was swollen up, and I put on 84 pounds of fluid in like about 3.5 weeks. And I just swelled up like a balloon. And it was the most miserable thing. It was making me super sick. And so I worked on that for like 6 months, trying to get that fluid off. And every day was just a fight. Like I couldn't sleep at night. Every time I would fall asleep, I'd wake up gasping for air. I couldn't breathe. I didn't know it at the time, but it turns out whatever happened there gave me pretty severe sleep apnea. And so I kept waking up with these headaches. I wouldn't know where it was. It took me, it'd take me 10 minutes to kind of get my head back and kind of know where I was. I lost, I'm so happy. I still have a little bit of it. That's why I stumble for words a lot and I pause. When I was doing that, I lost. It was so bad. It was almost like I couldn't talk for 6 months or more. I couldn't recall words. They'd be in my head, but I could not grab them and talk. And that was going on. And then at about the 6-month point, something bad happened, I guess, when I was sleeping. I must have really stopped breathing for a long time, because I woke up and I had the worst headache I ever had. I didn't know what day it was. I didn't know where I was. So I reached and grabbed my pulse ox, and it was at 62 or 64% of oxygen concentration, which was terrible. And usually that'll, I'd been down in the 70s, but I've never been down into the low 60s before. And that time it took like 4 to 6 hours to come out of that. It was really bad. I was feeling really sick, and I was having a hard time recalling words. I thought I had a stroke or something. I wasn't sure what was going on. And so I finally had to go to the hospital because I had all this fluid on me, and I couldn't tell what that was. And so I went to the hospital, and they kept me for 10 or 11 days, and they got off 64 pounds of fluid in that time on Lasix, and they figured that I had just stopped breathing because my oxygen was so low all the time. So they prescribed me with oxygen and sent me home with an oxygen concentrator and bottles, and they gave me a bunch more asthma stuff and another, whole protocol of bullcrap food. And I was just kind of defeated and depressed, and I just wasn't even sure I was going to make it out of it at the time. So I was eating that stuff, and I was on the oxygen, and I just bloomed. And at that time, I was already having trouble during that time because I'd already kind of started working from home because I couldn't even make it up the stairs, a year prior to that to work because my health was going downhill. And at the time, I thought it was because when I was on that high protein weightlifter diet, I was so weak all the time. I didn't know, but at the time, I was eating just enough carbohydrates not to go into ketosis and not to become fat adapt, but I wasn't eating enough carbs to have any energy. So I was just weak all the time, couldn't breathe all the time. Weight wasn't really moving. And so I started working from home because I couldn't get up the stairs to my office at the shop, And so, yeah, so fast forward to then, I gained so much weight. That's why I literally at that point, I couldn't stand up for, 90 seconds at a time. If I was walking around, my oxygen would drop even with the oxygen on 5 liters, which was the max that machine would put out. Just the whole room would start spinning. I'd get tunnel vision. I'd just start blacking out after 90 seconds,
Wow.
And so it was just a nightmare. But at least when I was in that chair getting oxygen, I was able to finally start sleeping a little bit better. And so after a few months going back and forth, I was back on the stupid standard American diet because I'd been kind of beat up and kind of defeated and was following the doctor's regimen, trying to figure out what this thing was going on with my air and my health, and I didn't know what to do. And I didn't even have energy or resources to shop and really cook, so I was just ordering crap off of Instacart and trying to order from Instacart and DoorDash, trying to order, proteins and vegetables and all this stupid crap. But at least the oxygen made my head start feeling a little bit better, and I started sleeping a little bit better. And so finally, I got a little bit better. I got some of the fluid off me. I was taking fluid pills. And and when I was in the hospital, they said I had congestive heart failure, and that's why the fluid was building up. My lungs were all scarred up from the COVID. And so those little, I forget what you call them, but the little balloons on the end of your bronchial tubes that transfer oxygen and carbon dioxide, those had been weakened and scarred, and so they were leaking fluid into my lungs from the blood, and that's why everything was building up, and that's why I was getting so much fluid on me. And then they said that it also caused me to have lymphedema because my calves swelled up. I don't know how much my legs were, but I couldn't even hardly lift my legs. My legs were 35 inches in diameter at the calves, on each one.
That's how much I am around the waist. That's
right.
That's actually more. That's
yeah. That's each one of my calves swelled up to 35 inches in diameter.
Yeah.
I was sleeping in a recliner, and I kept having to buy these recliners, and they kept breaking. And they were, because I could only find one that was good for 600 pounds, and they kept breaking. And 2 weeks after I'd buy this recliner, they're electric, but the electric foot thing that would lift up my legs were so heavy it would break, right? Within 2 weeks of buying it. So I ordered on Amazon these like paracords that climbers use, 50, 100-foot ropes, and I'd tie it around my ankles, and I'd have to pull up on my legs to get them up on a footstool so that I could elevate my legs. I'd have to lift them with this cord because my legs were so heavy, and just like Bill, from Alaska there, Bill Knott, my worry every day and the biggest part of, my day was just getting to the bathroom, it was absolutely a nightmare. And so that stuff went on from October 21st until September or October sometime of 2021 until September 28th of 2022. I was sitting there fighting that, and I just got heavier and heavier, and pretty soon I just knew I was not going to make it back if I didn't do something. So I decided to go back to keto at the time because I really hadn't got on to do carnivore yet, but I knew enough and been reading enough through that whole time that I needed to do basically what I would call ketovore now. It was basically carnivore plus carnivorous vegetables and olive oil. And so I started doing that. And I just started off, I was making taco salads, and that was September 29th of 2022. And I was making taco salads, and I was reading my ketones, and I was just getting really diligent about it. And so I decided that I wasn't in ketosis good enough. I was feeling better. So I cut out all the dairy. I cut out the cheese and the sour cream, and I just got rid of it. And then I cut out the seasoning for the meat. I got rid of the taco seasoning because I didn't know what was in it. And then I was using some black olives in the salad. I got rid of those. I was using some hot sauce in the salad. I got rid of that. And so pretty soon, I was just eating meat and lettuce. And I was like, I'm so close to carnivore, and I really hate lettuce. So I swapped out the lettuce and started eating eggs. And then I basically went on the BBB&E from that point, And that was actually, I made that choice to get rid of all the seasonings and everything and do BBB&E on January 1st of 2023 is when I started that. And the only thing different is even through that time of the kind of ketovore, I still had terrible cravings for soda. And it was absolutely ridiculous how strong it was. And so I follow a guy on YouTube called Dr. Berg, and I really like that guy.
Yeah, he's good. I like him too.
Yeah, he's great. And so he had an idea about if you have a soda addiction, he said to take volcanic lemon juice, sparkling water, and liquid stevia and make like a sparkling lemonade, and then also take electrolytes that would help you. So I did that for 6 or 7 weeks. And between doing that and taking the electrolytes, and also at the time I decided to get on, I decided to start treating what I figured was a burnt out adrenal gland. So I started taking his adrenal support, vitamin B1, vitamin B nutritional yeast, and a few other things of his. And so I don't know, whatever combination that was between the lemon juice, the electrolytes, the supplements, and BBB&E, all the cravings died. It was like a switch was thrown, and they were all gone. And all the depression, gone. All of the anxiety, gone. I start reading my oxygen levels that have been, 88% or less since I was 18 years old. And my oxygen concentration was going through the roof, and I was breathing good for the first time ever in my life. And from that point, everything just started getting better. The fluid started coming off my legs. I was trying to get back on the scale and weigh, but at that time when my legs got so big, I couldn't get on the scale because my calves were both 35 inches. So my legs were so far apart, I couldn't get 2 feet on the scale at the same time. So I couldn't even get on the scale. And so it took about 3.5 to 4 months between the ketovore, eventually into the carnivore. And I finally lost enough weight, and my calves had gotten small enough that I finally got on the scale. There was a point in there about 2.5 months in that I was trying to force it to happen. On the scale, I had this big wide scale that's good for 770 pounds, and I just got both feet on it, and that the digital readout cracked when I was standing on it. And I was like, oh, it's definitely time for an intervention, Big T. You're breaking the 770 pound scale.
Wow.
So I was laughing, but yeah, finally at about month 4, I was able to get on that scale, and it said 647 pounds. And I was like, at least it's a start point. At least I know where it is. And I was kind of encouraged by it because I knew how much I'd lost already to be getting around better and to be able to even stand on the scale. I was like, I must have lost a good amount. So I decided to track from that point out over the next 5 months, and then take that average and work backwards for those beginning 4 months. And that's where I came up with 715 pounds. I actually think it was probably a fair amount over that with the fluid because, when you first start, the fluid comes off pretty fast, and I could see how much fluid was coming out of my legs.
Yeah.
But that's a good low average. But yeah, and the rest has been history, man. Like the congestive heart failure is gone. I'm completely off the oxygen, and now my oxygen saturation for the first time in my life, just sitting here, is 96%. I've
Awesome.
never seen it that high. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's just incredible. And oh, can you see me still? Sorry, something happened there. And it's just incredible. And yeah, I mean, I just, I can walk, or I can walk, I can get up. As I tell people, it was just crazy because every day it's so much fun because something new happens that I'll just do it without thinking about it, and I'll be like, I don't think I've been able to do that for 5 years. Like the other day, I was working, I was on my phone in this chair, and I had my water bottle in one hand, my phone in the other, and I just stood up and walked to the kitchen because I was getting some ice. And then I even interrupted my phone call because I realized that was the first time that I haven't had to really think about how to get out of my chair and to push off the armrest in 3 or 4 years, And now all of a sudden I can just stand up. I can just walk around. I can do these things. And that's what I'm addicted to now. I'm addicted to getting stronger and feeling better every day. And the carb cravings are completely gone. The depression is gone. Not to mention when I'm at work here, my mind works so much better. I can handle so many tasks at the same time that I couldn't handle before. I remember numbers, and I do a ton of analytic stuff and numbers on my computer that were always a nightmare for me. I used to think I had dyslexia because I had always read the last thing first and the first thing last. That went away. That's gone. I mean, I just cannot believe everything that straightened out for me. It's truly nothing less than a miraculous miracle. I can't even, believe it. And yeah, it's just, I mean, I didn't have any plans for the future because I didn't even know if I was going to wake up the next morning. I kept not breathing at night. Now it's just like, I know it's a matter of time before, I bet it's 12 more months and I should have another 200 pounds off, I mean, it's crazy. It's absolutely a miracle.
It's a done deal, isn't it?
It is.
You've got a framework and a formula to do it. That's it's appreciate you sharing your story there, Todd. I'm just going to run through a few of the comments here while we're here. So Tracy, I didn't know this about you, that your dad is a cattle rancher. I would love to go to a cattle ranch. I mean, I grew up in the bush in Western Australia, but to actually see an American cattle ranch, that would be cool. Amanda, Amelia, hopefully you're still with us, and hopefully you're a night owl. Mike Shaw likes your tech. I was just saying to Todd, sorry, my voice is going for some reason. I was saying to Todd before there, his background tech's a bit a bit distracting. Okay, let's try that again. But obviously some people like it too. It's just interesting. Quartzsite Carnivore, thanks for joining us. Yeah, Mike. Yeah, Carnivores. I love tech. That's for sure. Shana, you're one of 6 kids. God, that's a big family. I've got 4 kids myself.
My brother's got 7 kids.
Wow, that's a lot.
Long winters here.
Yeah, and Amelia, you had 6 and they're all grown up. I bet that's a relief. All right, so let's have we've got a few to get through. I'll skip over the ones that people have already. Dancing live from Florida. Thanks for joining us. Mike Shaw likes shrimp. I actually haven't really eaten any shrimp. We don't call it shrimp. We call them like prawns over here. Haven't tried any out. Question from Amelia. New to carnivore, total newbie. Love raw cheese. Is that allowed? Look, it's whatever you want to. When people ask, is this allowed? I say, look, you've really got to do what works for you. If the carnivore framework is essentially animal products. So if it comes from animal, it's on the list, and then you've got to assess whether that is good for you. So I'd say as a starting point, start with meat, cheese, butter, even cream, if they're all things that you can tolerate, you're fine with dairy. Some people may find that the lactose in cheese is a problem, or the amount that's in it. If it's raw, I'd say just see how you go. I had to give up cream. Well, I still have pretty much given up cream for a period of time because I was using it to feed an addiction to sweet things. So in order to sort of eradicate that, I just had to let go of the cream for a while. And I had some on the weekend, like it was on a dessert that my mother-in-law had made, so I just ate some of the cream, and I know I was fine. So you've just got to assess that for yourself as far as is that allowed? Absolutely. And I've even heard Dr. Kiltz, who's awesome, say, occasionally he does have a sweet thing here and there. It's like, well, don't get too hung up on doing everything like by the book, but just do what works for you. And if you need to have raw cheese for a period of time, or you can have it in your diet and it's not a problem for you, like it's not an addictive thing, it's not a craving, you don't binge on it, I'd say go for it. And yes, as Mike says, if you can tolerate it, for sure. So, Circle 04, thank you for joining us. My Weight Loss Life, good evening.
Hey, Greg.
Yeah, there you go, Greg. Okay, Susan, commercial fisherman's. I bet you had some pretty good fresh fish and seafood. Tracy, yeah, I think that's good advice too. If you're finding you're stalling, you might want to experiment with leaving out. I mean, life is an experiment, right? It's one big experiment and test to see what works and question everything, which I think is what you've done. That's really great. When you're talking about doctors, question, don't just accept everything at face value. Do your own research, make your own mind up. That's why I get cranky with the government sometimes. They want to make all their decisions for us, but I think if you can, we're adults. We should be able to make our own decisions about what we put in our bodies, what we eat, what we listen to.
Oh.
Somebody else likes your computer monitors. Shana, yeah. It's some people just can't tolerate it. I actually learned there's only around about 25 to 30% of the world's population that actually, as adults, have the necessary genetic. There was their genes. I forget the word. It's like when you get an abnormality, but it becomes a gene modification that sticks around and it's beneficial. So there was some people from like 10,000 years ago in certain countries where they were. They had a lot of dairy, a lot of milk, etc., and their genes modified. I wish I could remember that word. I have to look it up. So that they had it was a permanent thing that lasted with them until they were adults. So normally, once children reach the age of 3 to 5, the gene that allows the processing of the enzyme for lactose is not produced anymore. But for some, like I think I'm one of those people. My ancestry is European, and I don't have a problem digesting milk. I don't drink milk anymore, but I certainly never had a problem. But you can see how some people do, and some people in certain cultures, like in cultures where they don't have any milk at all, are really sensitive to anything that has even a hint of lactose in it. So for some people, that means they just can't have cheese or anything without it upsetting them, causing them inflammation. A few more people love the background. Thanks for the feedback. Yeah, it is the red pill, isn't it? For so many people, it's the red pill, and that's certainly been that's for you, Todd. Let's see. All right. I think I've gotten everyone. Well, Kaza, thank you for joining us. He's always showing up on my channel. Well, I'm assuming he actually. I've got to be careful sometimes with the pronouns. Sounds like a he. All right, yeah, thanks for joining us, B-Dog. The replay will be available. I'll add some chapters to it to make it a bit easier to find as well. Yeah, sous vide. So I keep talking about sous vide, and I've done a couple of experiments with rump steak, and I discovered the hard way. After I talked to my brother-in-law, who's a chef, and I said, I cooked a sous vide rump steak for 24 hours, and he said, how'd that go? It was really well cooked. See, the issue is you got to have a cut of meat that's got a lot of connective tissue in it. So something like a rump steak, which has very little, he said you just want to like do that for maybe even half an hour just to get it up to temperature and then sear it, and it'll be a whole lot better. So, I'm going to try
Yeah,
again.
definitely. I found that out too because yeah, even like sirloins, because sirloins are really lean. I thought, oh man, these sirloins are going to be delicious, and I actually like those fried on the grill better than sous vide. But yeah, like a brisket, a good fatty brisket with a huge fat
Yeah,
fat
that's what I want
over.
to try.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's cool learning all these different things, different ways to cook, isn't it? Things I didn't even know before.
well, that's one
Uh,
thing. One thing that being a carnivore will do. I remember listening to Jordan Peterson when Joe Rogan was asking him what his diet was like, and he goes, "Well, I have sparkling water, I have mineral water, and I have tap water." And he goes, "Well, those are all just water." He's like, "No, when you're on, when you're on an elimination diet, those distinctions matter."
yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
And so I feel that
and
way about how you prepare meat now, because all of a sudden, just whether you're going to sous vide it, smoke it, grill it, now those are all like new menu items.
yeah, and there's still so many that there is to try, like different cuts, and I feel like I'm only just scratching the surface, and
Totally.
I've been eating this way for like 3 months. So where just where's your weight loss? Is it like, so you think you're around about 715? So where are you at
Yeah.
now?
Right now I'm at about 485, so I'm right around 230 pounds as of today, and this is basically right at about 11 months and 3 days.
Yeah, yeah,
So
that's
uh,
awesome.
and I do think that my metabolism's working better. And I haven't started lifting yet. I'm working on my garage right now so I can make that a weight gym.
Hmm.
But my body composition is so much different this time than all the other times when I was losing weight before and losing muscle, and getting
Hmm.
weak.
Yeah,
Now I'm losing weight, but I actually feel like with the body composition, it's even kind of a greater exchange because I have so much more muscle on my arms and my shoulders now. Like I'm not lifting, but my everything just got solid and built up in muscle. And I mean, I'm so much
hmm,
stronger now. It's
hmm.
it's crazy than where I was 11 months ago. It's insane.
Yeah, yeah. I found the same thing. It was like all of a sudden, because I used to like have a lot of protein powder and
Yeah,
creatine and all the rest of it, and I don't take any supplements, no nothing. It's just what I just whole foods, and yeah, instantly like threw on a couple of kilos, but then it's gradually gone away. But as the body fat has come off as well, but
right.
it's strength wise, and just to be able to do that at 52, right? That's the thing. It's like I thought, well, that would be pretty tough to add on muscle mass as I get older, but no, that's actually
Have
not
you
the case
ever?
at all.
Do you do any TRT or anything like that, or have you ever thought about it?
No, I mean I keep it as a like as if it ever is something that if I ever have issues with my training, or I feel like there's some limitation there, but yeah, no, it's not something I've even ever explored because I didn't feel like that I have to. I feel like I get really good results from my training. I've got no problems, maintaining my muscle mass. I don't have any, reproductive issues of any description. Never have. So, I think that comes down. A lot of it comes down to diet, and I think that a lot of people that go down that route, it would be interesting to see, well, what happens if you actually made these modifications to your diet? Would you need to start mucking with your body chemistry if you went
Well,
that way? And I feel like that they probably wouldn't.
yeah, I
Um,
should be able to tell you because that's one other thing I found on when I just found keto. I was also researching low testosterone, and I was like, I think I have low testosterone. So I went and got a blood test, a huge blood panel from a hormone doctor that actually is right here in my town that studied under Jason Fung. So I was really happy about that. But my testosterone was terrible low. It was my total testosterone was 237, and it's supposed to be between 300 and 900, I think.
hmm,
As the normal range. And when I was talking to my hormone doctor, he even said that even that average is actually low because it's based off of a sick population. It's the average of a sick population. And
Yeah.
so he put me on TRT, and that was shortly before I got COVID. And when I did, I stopped taking it because I just had too much going on at the time. But I haven't got back on it yet because I wanted to give carnivore a try. So I think on my 1 year anniversary, I'm going to have that taken a look at it. I think because of the amount of muscle I built, I bet it's gotten quite a bit better. But if it hasn't, I'm trying to decide if I want to go back on TRT or not, or just I think I'm probably going to give this another 6 months or a year and see how it does. Because I
Yeah, I
heard.
think that. So
Oh, I was just going to say, I heard when you get on it that sometimes you can't get off of it because your body will stop producing it itself. So.
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I'm not a medical doctor, but my understanding is that there's the signals so your free circulating testosterone is the determining factor of how much testosterone your body produces. So your testes produce, and then if there's plenty floating around, well, then the signal is, well, we don't need to produce anymore because there's already plenty in your system. So if you did come off, then your body's got to do a reset, and I can imagine that would take some time. I feel like the amount of, especially when you're eating really fatty cuts of meat, you've got plenty of fat in your diet. I mean, they're all building blocks for every hormone in your body. So I think that's where the standard American standard Australian diet really falls off the wagon, because you just don't have enough fat to be able to produce those molecules in sufficient quantity, and then the roller coaster begins. So
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
You got to wonder how much of the mental illness or depression stuff would heal up if people would just eat animal fat. Because my doctor never told me that depression and anxiety was a diet problem. He said it was he called it a hereditary chemical imbalance.
Yeah, and you know what? I mean, I think that there are instances where I think for the most part, doctors do mean well, and they're grossly misinformed, and they perhaps have not. They've had training, that institutional training that has led them to understand certain things in certain ways, and I mean that doesn't mean that they're bad people, but they are believing something that isn't actually necessarily true. And it's I like that there are plenty of doctors now that are saying, okay, well, this is what we learn in medical school, but this is actually what's true. And hopefully there'll be more and more medical professionals that'll understand, okay, well, I can't ignore all the evidence now, so I've got to do my
Yeah, and I
research.
should definitely clarify that. My doctors are super nice people. Like, as people, I like them, and I totally believe that they think they're helping, that their heart's in the right place. I don't blame the doctors directly. I blame, the medical schools, because just like Gary Taub says, he said all this bad science and bad literature gets into medical schools and the medical journals, because it's the same. Because good research and good scientific studies and good epidemiology studies cost a lot of money to fund, and it's especially difficult in human beings. It's one thing if you're working on a cadabra, right? It's a static, sample that's not going to change. But when you're talking about people's free will, and you have to follow them for 10 years and just trust that it's a controlled study, that they're not fluctuating or going off, the protocol or whatever, it's extremely difficult and extremely expensive to do that kind of research. And he said, so it's not like anybody's funding those things unless it's from one of these 12, major companies that own everything, and they particularly love epidemiology studies, because depending on how you build the study, you can almost predict the outcome, because they love to do correlation as causation in these studies, just so that they can get a bunch of word salad to print out and put in put in a new textbook or something. And at the end of the day, it's really, in my opinion, I think this is right. It's because these companies, the Coca-Colas and the Nabiscos and the Kellogg's, they don't want you to believe that there's a difference in a calorie in a can of Coke or a box of Fruit Loops versus a steak. And then that way they could put the blame on you. If you were so weak that you couldn't adhere to this 2,000 calories of Fruit Loops, there's no difference between the Fruit Loops soda and all this nonsense, and steak, boy, that causes inflammation. It's bad for you. It's terrible for the planet. Don't eat that. But it's a personal, willpower problem. They could put the blame back on you because, if we ever decided that wasn't true and everybody woke up to that and decided that Coca-Cola and Nabisco and all these people were selling poison to the public and causing cancer and heart disease and metabolic disease, I mean, wow, what would the class action suit on that look like,
Yeah. Well, we just have to exercise good choices and use our knowledge and what we've learned to the best of our ability. So there's a couple of questions that have popped up here. Tracy was curious about how low did your red blood cells go down? Did you actually have a measurement? Is it something that was measured?
Yeah, I don't remember what it was at the time. I'd have to go back through I'll try to answer that in the comments later because I'll go dig up the paperwork because I don't remember how low it went down, but I did get it measured. Yeah. That's how I found out today. I have no idea.
Yeah. So there's one here from Amy. I think I'm not sure if Amy is someone who's on my locals community. Anyway, there's fatigue. I should just mention I've just recently set up a locals community. So if anybody wants to hang out there, then it'll be in the comments. The fatigue issue and salt. There was I forget the name of the doctor. He's really good. He has lots of great videos about carnivore and keto and how fatigue is more often associated with salt and blood pressure. And that often if you're feeling fatigued then and you just have a little bit of salt, it can really quite miraculously change. And this newer research is only just beginning to understand the real relationship between salt, blood pressure and mitochondrial function. So that's where fatigue comes in. And I just know for myself, like, I don't know if any of you have seen some of the workouts that I do. For example, the workout where the boxing, that was 25 minutes. So that's in a totally fasted state. I've not eaten anything since 6:30 the night before. And I'll go flat out for 25 minutes, really high intensity, no problems with energy at all. So you should be able to do that and, at my age as well without any problems. And a lot of that is just making sure that salt was a big factor in that. And you just got to make sure that you do sufficiently have enough. And if you're losing a lot of weight, it's especially important because you're dumping a lot of fluid. Every time you lose fluid, you're losing some electrolytes with it. You're going to have a lot of electrolytes that you need to replace to keep everything in balance. Let's see. Yeah, I'm surprised you're still alive too, and your will to live is something else as well.
Oh man, yeah, the lung things I really can relate to JT on the lung stuff that he talks about on the moon Coco Moonshine Fam, because that was me and him had a little bit of a conversation about that. But yeah, that was an absolute brutal nightmare. And yeah, I had no idea how bad 62 was when I got to the doctor. He's like, "Why didn't you come in when it was in the 70s?" And I was like, "Well, I didn't think it was that bad." And he's like, "It's like close to death."
Yeah. Alveoli, that was the word you were trying to look for before. Thank you, Mum of Three Adults. You were saying that the bits at the end of the bronchial tube,
exactly.
the tiny ones, they're the ones that absorb the oxygen. Yeah,
thank you.
Appreciate that. So if you guys have enjoyed this, I appreciate if you did hit the like button and certainly go and check out Todd's channel. He's a new creator, and he's going to be making some big dent in the carnivore community. He's got a lot of content that he wants to produce. I'm just going to do a few more and then we'll start to wrap it up. Yeah, hospital food. Remember, if you ever go to hospital, you can always demand the food that you want. they can't force you to eat the food that they provide. What else have we got here? Right. I think, Dr. Berg. Dr. Berg is actually really good. And Dr. Ekberg too. He's good as well. I like both of those guys. And of course, Dr. Berry. Everybody loves Dr. Berry.
Berry's awesome.
Yeah, it must be like being used to having your oxygen saturation so low and then to have it like be high. It'd be like being on an oxygen bottle, but not.
Oh yeah,
Compared. Yeah, all the
it's
time.
it is so much better. I can't even tell you. It's incredible, and I actually have plans for some videos because I'm planning on starting here in the next week or two. It's called EWOD. It's called Exercise with Oxygen Therapy,
Hmm.
and it's the next best thing to having a hyperbaric oxygen chamber. But it's basically where you do a high interval workout for 10 minutes, and it has the equipment allows you to breathe in 900 liters in that 10 minutes of 97.3% pure oxygen, and it hyperoxygenates all the tissue and cells, and it causes like an 800% increase in stem cell growth during that time, and it causes like a 600% increase in hormones and growth hormone.
Wow. Yeah. Sounds high tech as well.
It's not
It's
bad.
good.
It's like $3,500 is all, and you get a big bladder and an oxygen concentrator, and you fill it up, and it's got a mask, and then you just kind of run flat out and get your heart rate, to like 150 or so, and you just
Yeah.
breathe in all that oxygen, and I mean, the stuff that it's been curing has just been incredible, and it really helps for. I have some neuropathy in my left leg, especially from the lymphedema, and it's supposed to really help myelin growth. Uh, replace the myelin on the nerves.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. All right. I'm gonna quickly rip through the comments that I can see here. Yeah. Go for it, Amelia. You don't know unless you try. Conduct your experiment on your own body. See what happens. You might find that there's some vegetables that you tolerate well, some that you don't. If they are fine, well, keep them in if you want to do that. Thank you, Peachy Bamin MD. Appreciate that.
Thank you
Thank you to
very much.
everyone who's joined us on the channel today. Appreciate your feedback and also your questions. And yeah, absolutely. I think yours is a story that many will find inspiration from, Todd, especially Bill and others in a similar situation. So yeah, we want to keep hearing more from you, buddy.
Keep up.
All right. So Free Woman from Perth, WA. I used to live in Perth for 15 years. Thanks for joining us. Nice and, well, not that early for you now. It's like 9 o'clock over there. All right. Thank you for joining us from Michigan. Moni Shippewa. See if I missed anybody. Laura Conway, you were in YouTube jail, were you? Wasn't me that did it. Okay. All right. I think I've given. Oh, Crypto Carnival. We had a question one. But we'll just have to make this our last question, guys, because I've got another appointment to go to called the frying pan with the bacon and eggs. 8 months strict line diet resolved a bunch of issues and at ideal weight. Starting to test adding things back in on week 2 of raw butter and going well. Suggestions on order of items to test. I don't know if there's any right or wrong way to do that, Crypto Carnivore. I'd say, if any experiment, if you just change one variable, that's a good experiment. So if you've added in raw butter and you're going well with that and you want to try something else, then just add one thing in, see what happens. If you add multiple things in, well, you don't know which one it was that might have caused you an issue. So that's my suggestion there. All right. Okay. Listen, guys, I'm going to wrap it up there. Have you got anything that you want to leave people with before we go our separate ways there, Todd?
I'd just say if you're on the fence and you're thinking about trying it, I think everybody should try carnivore for at least 60 days. And I think if they do it, I don't think they'll ever go back to the standard American diet. Honestly, it has been, I called my channel the Carnivore Cure because I say it all the time, but carnivore, and I realize that that's just a description, but an animal-based, proper, human diet, it's not a fad diet. It is a cure, and all those things that your doctor's saying that are hereditary and passed down, and they're just something you got to live with. I don't think any of them are. I truly believe that it's all dietary, from depression, anxiety, metabolic disease, the whole gamut. I think you can really, if you take control of it, you can free yourself and give yourself a new life. I truly believe that.
Yeah, 100%. All right. Well, thanks for joining us, everybody. Amelia, Amy, Susan, Laura, Melissa, Tracy, Amy. All right, great. I really appreciate you guys joining in. We'll be back here next week. Next week, I've got the Shane and Amy, the Sightless Carnivores, coming on. And we'll have more videos coming out for you during the week. We'll see you guys on the flip side. Just wait there, Todd, and I'll see everyone else soon.
See you guys.